to you all. This is our 2021 Connecticut Land Conservation Conference. For those of you that might not know me, I am Amy Blaymore Patterson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council. If at any time I seem to be disappearing in and out of the screen, let me know. Although the background behind me is it's not one of those virtual screens, it's actually real. I also want to acknowledge that we in Connecticut are on the traditional territory of the Mohegan, the Pawcasset, the Wappinger, the Pequot, and other indigenous peoples. We take this time to acknowledge the original caretakers of the land and encourage you to spend some time getting to know their cultures and the history of the land on which you live, hike, and enjoy. This is our second virtual conference since 2020 and our first ever scheduled in June. The good news is that we are planning to return to Wesleyan University in March for our 2022 annual conference. If you are not all muted, I'd say whoop it up with me, woohoo! And fingers crossed that we arrive there as scheduled next year. As with every conference, we rely tremendously on the generosity of our sponsors, and this year is no exception. We are very grateful to our lead sponsors, Eversource Energy, Audubon Connecticut, Aquarian Water Company, Connecticut Forest and Park Association, Connecticut River Gateway Commission, Donosky and Associates, Karen and Fazio, Land Trust Alliance, Houstonic Valley Association, and Litchfield Hills Greenprint Collaborative, Little Green Light and Landscape, the Nature Conservancy, the Trust for Public Land, and 17 other organizations, including many land trusts, who have chosen to continue to support us as we offer this alternative conference format, and we are super grateful. The theme of our 21 conference, Voices from the Field, What is a Land Trust Now?, was born out of the conversations we have had with so many of you through the past year and a half. Whether single town and all volunteer or professionally staffed, regional or statewide organizations, Connecticut's 130 land trusts have been busier than ever. We've been there for people from all over the state who have sought relief on your trails and parks and other green spaces like never before. You've added thousands of acres of protected land, upheld your stewardship responsibilities, and sought to engage with communities throughout outings and programming, all offered virtually or under restricted COVID guidelines. As many land trusts celebrate milestone anniversary, boards are also contemplating succession plans and organizational sustainability. And as if the day-to-day work of land trusts is not enough, the last 2 years have underscored significant global issues to contemplate: climate change, racial injustice, an alarming rise in extinction rates, and a 30 by 30 initiative to save the Earth's natural resources before it's too late. With these and other issues around land and water continuing to evolve, so too must Connecticut's land trusts, begging the question, what is a land trust now? Today, we are joined by your Connecticut Land Trust peers to kick off a series of 4 conversations over the next 2 weeks on how land trusts are maneuvering through a changing world. And I'm going to ask Yao to pull the map up of our land trusts. And this is just to give you a sense of where our presenters' service areas are around the state. Here's Avalonia, here is the Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust, which also actually does cover this entire Southeastern service area. Wittenberry Land Trust up here. We've got Aspetuck down here in Fairfield County, and then we have the Cornwall Conservation Trust. Yao, you can stop the map. So I'm going to dive right in with our roundtable participants and say thanks for joining us here again today. Let's start with some intros. In addition to the basic information about your organizations, I'm going to ask that each of you comment on the following preliminary questions. And by the way, to all of our attendees out there, I really ask that you go ahead, throw your comments, throw your information in that chat. We're really interested to hear from you as well. So what did your land trust look like when it started? And how has it evolved over the years? And finally, what are your land trust's biggest challenges? And I'm going to start in alphabetical order by organization with David Brandt from Aspetuck. Take it away, David.
Thanks for having us. Great to see everybody. We are Aspetuck Land Trust. I'm David Brandt. I'm the executive director. I've been here, for 12 years now, since 2008. We were incorporated in 1966. We are a regional land trust. We serve Southwest Connecticut and Fairfield County. We are currently in Easton, Weston, Fairfield, Westport, but we do have some land in Reading, in Wilton, and in Bridgeport. We have 150 properties in 7 towns total, and a little over 2,000 acres. So in this kind of suburban, exurban area, that seems like a fair amount of land. We are a staffed land trust. We have 6 full-time staff, including myself. In terms of member supporters, who we live and die by, we have 1,672 members in the 2020 calendar year. We actually had a pretty big growth in the number of members last year, I think, as we all probably did due to COVID, and some of our outreach work to homeowners. So we grew basically from 1,024 to 1,672. Talk a little bit more about why. What did the land trust look like when it started? Well, I was born in 1967. We were started in 1966. So I don't really know what it looked like, but I know that, there was a little bit more land to protect back then. And I know it was a pretty small group of hardcore committed conservationists. We were actually started by Barlow, Cutler, Watton, and Westport, who essentially started the land trust because she was trying to protect salt marsh. And that's what they used to do back then. They were filling in salt marshes. So that's really how we got started. She saw a need for a conservation organization to come in and protect land. She eventually went on to also start the Conservation Commission in Westport. So Amy, getting to some of your questions, I'm going to run through this quickly. I know we all, want to cover these things. In terms of the evolution, I mean, just what a great topic. What is a land trust now? Because I think, land trusts are really changing and evolving, and it's so timely, just this very subject. There's been a lot of changes, just since I started with the land trust, but I would say some of the big changes in terms of evolution is right now we're not just focused on land conservation, which we were solely land conservation group, as were most land trusts back then. It's really, I look at it as land conservation plus now. It's land conservation, saving land, land conservation currently our core business, but there's a lot of other adjuncts that surround that, that kind of core mission. Climate change, the biodiversity crisis have been huge drivers of change over the past decades. Development pressure in our area, which is suburban, exurban, suburb of New York City, essentially, has been huge. We have to be, that's forced us to be a little bit more strategic and more proactive about protecting land because it goes quick. So we have to know what's out there, and we have to have kind of an integrated strategy to go after those parcels. There's fewer properties to protect. Environmental equity has certainly, we all know has been an increasingly important thing that we're talking about and trying to address as we get out of our kind of mindset of just living in our own towns. How do we extend and build bridges, to other communities who traditionally have not been really considered, or who don't really have opportunities to protect land in towns, more urban towns, for example, like Bridgeport. So how do we build bridges? How do we use our members and our donors to kind of support those communities that really need that support? Community food security is certainly a big issue that has come to the fore over the past decades, especially over the past decade. Protecting more farms, connecting more people to farmers to farms, creating a more kind of equitable, and sustainable food system. And I think, this idea of a regional conservation partnership that we've been involved in here in Southwest Connecticut through Heisted Foundation, the H2H Hudson to Houstonic initiative, which is a group that is really a regional conservation partnership. So this idea of taking a larger look at the landscape, right? Really important. We're not just, we're a regional land trust, but that's forced us to even take a larger view. So, what are our biggest challenges? Well, our challenges really are directly related to, what's changed, right? That all those things that I just mentioned were really are challenges, but they're opportunities. So we're really moving on some of those changes and challenges in our environment, in our landscape, the ecological challenges about the biodiversity crisis and climate change, specifically biodiversity, the lack thereof, and development in our fragmented area has led us to form a Green Corridor Initiative, which is a 40,000 acre corridor spanning 7 towns, where we've identified the last open spaces to protect. And we've also engaged, which is a new kind of adjunct to our work, we're trying to engage homeowners in essentially building biodiversity in their yards. We can't protect all the land in our towns. Most of it's owned by homeowners. So we're engaging with them to increase biodiversity in their yards, which serves to impact, magnify our conservation mission. If we can get those homeowners to do good things in their yards, that helps a lot. We're addressing community food security issues. That's a big challenge.
David, David, can you hear me? Yes.
Am I at 5 minutes yet?
You have, and we're going to move on because all of these terrific things that you're saying, we're going to explore in further detail as we move along. So let's hold on and let's get through everybody here with the intros, and then you're going to expand upon all of that in our next question. So thank you for all of that. It's unbelievable, actually, what you're doing.
Of course, thank you.
Let's go next with Terry Eichel for Avalonia.
Hi there. You can hear me, right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. My name is Terry Eichel. I am with Avalonia Land Conservancy, and I am the Director of Development and Programming. So Avalonia was founded in 1968, and I was also born after that. So some of this is historical knowledge that I've been told. It was originally known as the Houstonic Land Trust, and it was an entirely volunteer-led organization for years. I believe in the early 90s, the group changed their name to the Avalonia Land Conservancy to acknowledge the name of the bedrock that Southeastern Connecticut sits on. And so we conserve open space in New London County. That was a lot of blue dots on that little map. And it's primarily in Stonington, Groton, Ledyard, North Stonington, Griswold, and Preston. It's just over 4,300 acres that we have conserved and continue to steward. So I am the only full-time staff person, the Director of Development and Programming. We have one part-time staff person, our office manager, who is extraordinary, named Amy. If you call the office, you'll definitely be talking to her. And we're also working to hire a part-time stewardship coordinator, which is really exciting. Our preserves are managed entirely by volunteers. At this point, they're awesome, but it's a lot of work. And so I think having a stewardship coordinator is going to be terrific. So when we were founded, and I got to say thank you, Amy, for having me on. And it's really awesome to hear everyone's great ideas and thoughts and whatnot. Like the Houstonic Land Trust, we were also mainly focused on acquisition of open space that got a lot of donations in a lot of different areas. But as Avalonia grew, the organization, we realized the need to connect the preserves in order to create greenways, wildlife corridors, protect larger watersheds, and provide increased opportunities for an outdoor exploration, especially in communities that have not traditionally had access to open space. So now when we review our acquisition opportunities, we have a heightened focus on whether or not the proposed land connects or abuts to other open space. Does it provide wildlife habitat for endangered or threatened species, etc. I love partnering with other groups to achieve those aims. I'm an identical twin, so I've been working with others for my entire existence, and I love it when that works out. So, and I started with this organization in May of 2020. So right in the middle of the lockdown, right in the middle of the pandemic. And so we couldn't do any big events. So it was hard for me to meet anyone in any sort of large scale, but I was able to get together with individually on outdoor hikes with a lot of members, volunteers, and supporters to hear about their concerns, their history with Avalonia. And really spontaneously, without any prompting, people talked not only about wildlife conservation, but they talked about climate change, biodiversity loss, and racial justice. And so I shared these concerns with them. And it was really highlighted by a few days after I started, Christian Cooper, who is a Black man birding in Central Park, was harassed in Central Park by a woman who said she was going to call the police and say that a Black man was threatening her. And he wasn't. He had asked her to leash her dog in an area where dogs are supposed to be leashed because of the birds. And as land trusts, of course, we all know we want people to leash their dogs. And so that was the first, one of the first things that happened when I started Avalonia. And I was really horrified. And right away, my view of working for a land trust was really connected to a larger social issue in this country. And so we really began talking at that point how we can do our part to ensure that something like that doesn't happen in our preserves, that people of color feel welcome, and we're incorporating this into our programming now. So, and climate change is another thing that it consistently comes up as an issue that Avalonia really, our community cares about. And they want to see us taking a really active role in combating climate change. It's clear that climate change is here. You know, that's not up for debate. We're going to obviously be experiencing climate disruption. But people really want us to be more active in advocating, I think, for better climate policy and engaging in climate conscious practices. So those are two things that have really come up in my first year as issues that people really want us to focus on. And so I'll talk a little bit more in detail later on in the programming about how we're working on those two things. But I think as our land trust, one of the things that is important to understand is that our mission of land conservation doesn't exist in a vacuum. You know, like David said, it touches on many, many other areas of life. And the opportunity here is that our supporters' concerns don't exist in a vacuum either. And they're really glad to see us stepping into these conversations and taking concrete steps for change. So we have our opportunity and a responsibility to not only carry out our mission of conserving open space, but to do so in a way that's really relevant to the other issues that our society is facing. And so I'll get into more detail with that later.
Fantastic, Terry, thank you so much. Let's turn over to the Cornwall Conservation Trust and Barton Jones.
All right, so Cornwall Conservation Trust was formed in 1987. I was born 41 years before that, so I'm not among the youngest here. Our mission is to conserve open space lands in Cornwall and adjacent towns, and to manage those lands to promote wildlife habitat, forest improvement, water quality, farming, and public recreation. I just want to give you a brief overview of Cornwall. That's very important to our one town land trust. Cornwall was incorporated in 1740, so our land trust definitely came along much later. We're very large geographically. We have 46 square miles. That's more than 2 times the size of Hartford or New Haven. But we have the second lowest people per square mile, 30. Our peak population was in 1850, 2,500. It's now about 1,300. Not too many places in the state where you have 1,000 fewer people than you did in 1850. We're faced with an aging population like me and a diminishing number of young children. That's by way of background. The Conservation Trust has 3 part-time staff, Shelley Harms, who's our executive director, Harry White, who's our conservation director, and Kara Weigold, who's our office administrator. I've been the chair of the board for about 9 years, and I believe strongly in leveraging volunteers with paid staff. A shout out to Larry Power, who was the chair of Sharon Land Trust, who introduced the idea of land trusts in our area sharing staff. We have about 200 contributing members. In the early years, 1987, we had a balance sheet of about $3,000, and we're focused mostly on easements. Now we are an accredited land trust and own about 1,900 acres of forest and farmland, almost half of which was donated. We have easements on another 700 acres. Our balance sheet is now over $10 million with about $1 million in liquid assets. The challenge for Cornwall is to be both green and economically vibrant. We need affordable housing. We need more young people. We have the highest per capita cost in the state for our grammar school. If you can believe it, $35,000 a kid. We're still accused by many of keeping land more expensive and preventing development of housing and the town from getting tax dollars. Bottom line is, right now, we're finding it's easier to get money to buy stuff than to maintain it. So that's an overview of Cornwall Conservation Trust.
Thank you so much, Bart, and we will delve into some of those issues in a minute. Next, let's turn to Joanne Sheehan, who might be a newer face for many of our land trusts participating today. Joanne is with the Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust. Take it away, Joanne.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm really glad to be here. Yeah, and say a little about our land trust, which is a little different. So I am the president of the board of our land trust. I have a history of having done other work with community land trust, particularly back in the 1980s, which kind of got me into doing it again when we saw a need. So the Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust was incorporated in the spring of 2018, but we actually began to do organizing several years before that. So we are a membership-based organization, as are all community land trusts. We hold land for the development and stewardship of permanently affordable housing. I'll talk a little about how we do that. Land for food production, and right now most of that is urban food production. Green space, which is also primarily urban, since we are also in Avalonia's area, and do not see ourselves moving into that kind of work. And also preservation of land for facilities for community organizations, and that's both urban and rural. So basically, we conserve land for a variety of purposes in rural and in urban areas. And we kind of see ourselves as an organization and by the people, for the people, very, very grassroots. So community land trusts, of which there are 330 in the country and growing, we promote a balance between the rights and responsibilities of the community and of the individual. And so, for example, our permanently affordable housing has a ground lease that we own the land. We continue to hold the land in trust. The homeowner owns the home. We help them through, because they would be low, moderate income people. We help them through that process. We continue to help them and steward, providing stewardship throughout their time there. They can, those homes can be inherited by their family, just as anyone else's homes. Our conversations, to kind of get into our history, our conversations about creating a regional community land trust began back in 2014 when the Voluntown Peace Trust, which was put in trust by Bob Swan, who really created the C, as he would put it, in community land trust, put 40 acres in Voluntown, Connecticut into the Voluntown Peace Trust for the Community for Nonviolent Action. So that's been there since 1962, and the inspiration of people really developing this work nationally out of Voluntown. And there was a discussion between Voluntown Peace Trust and folks at St. Francis House in New London, all of us that have a little work with this, and the Francis Fund, about the need for a regional community land trust that would look at all of these kind of mission areas. And we looked at regional for the efficiency of administration, but we did not want to lose the real community aspect. So we have chapters within those communities, so real community involvement. So while we all believe in, I think, regionalization, the reality is that people in New London and people in Norwich and people in Voluntown all feel like they're in their own community. And so they do gather together in those chapters. The reason it took us so long to organize is we really wanted people to have an understanding of what both community land trusts are and to help develop it, so that, and we're particularly very sensitive to the racial diversity of the community. We're working right now in New London, which is predominantly people of color, and a lot of the people who started it, the majority were white folks. And so we kept doing local organizing and refusing to basically incorporate until we represented that community. And that took a couple of years to really do it in a way that was really doing the kind of education that we needed. And Fresh New London came on. So food security has been an important part of our work, and other local organizations joined in to some degree because their workers couldn't find affordable housing in the New London area. The idea of green space came from community meetings when we were saying, what do you need? And in urban areas, people were saying, there's no place to sit together. Like, it's our stoop and maybe the landlord doesn't like that. Fresh New London does have some community gardens, so that kind of is an addition. We put people through kind of an orientation to understand what community land trusts are, because they vote for a third of the board. So that's the other aspect of community land trust, which I think really addresses the succession issue in a different way. We can get into that later. But a third of our board are the members and represent the members. A third of our board represent the lessees. So that would be a homeowner or representative of an organization that has the land in trust. And we have, I said we have 51 members at this point. And then a third are public representatives, people we choose because they bring a skill, an interest, a constituency that's not represented already by those other two areas. We have 9 people on the board right now because we don't want to be board heavy. We want to be volunteer heavy and chapter heavy. And so we're coordinating that. Presently, we hold land with a ground lease in a 2-family home, and so we can provide rentals, but through the homeowner. We do not want to get into large rental housing. That's not the kind of work that we do. And we have a small community garden that Fresh New London does. We also hold a right of first refusal to several properties, particularly that are now being developed by other nonprofits in town. And we are in conversation with several groups around holding the land or a right to first refusal of other organizations. We had an executive director for 2 years in 2019 and 2020, but the pandemic kind of really halted our ability to do the kind of fundraising and the kind of projects we needed to do in the community to sustain that. So we now are all volunteer, but really look at needing to get back to having an executive director. So, and I think as a new organization, we're in that period where we had a lot of really early successes in terms of getting the house and the like, but we really need to kind of move into another category. And I would say that, yeah, fundraising is probably our biggest challenge right now as a fairly new organization.
Thank you, Joanne. I was just going to jump in and say, let's save some of this detail for our continuing conversation. It's fantastic. And we're just so delighted to have a community land trust in one of our conference roundtables. I think this might be a first.
Yes,
so we're excited about the conversation. Thank you. And last but not least, Vic from Wittenberry Land Trust.
Hi, Amy. Hi, everybody. And thank you for the invitation. So I represent the Wittenberry Land Trust. I'm the current president. As you saw earlier on the map, we're primarily located in Bloomfield, where most of our land was acquired, although we have small holdings in Windsor and West Hartford. The Wittenberry Land Trust was incorporated in 1982. As many land trusts, the stimulation was to receive land that was offered as donation by various private developers or individuals. And so the early mission was really to conserve open space. And our mission now is that the promotion to promote preservation, improvement, and protection and conservation of natural resources for the benefit of the community. We're essentially an all volunteer land trust. This year, for the very first time, we do have a contracted assistant to help with bookkeeping on a very limited basis. We have about 120 households. We don't count the individuals, we just count the households. And about half of them are lifetime members and half of them are annual members. We have evolved over the years. The land trust after it was incorporated, became a bit inactive and was, I would say, resuscitated about 15 years ago by a couple of very dedicated individuals, and who really resurrected the organization to be more active, both in terms of land acquisition and in terms of involvement with the community. So we're at a point now where we have what in comparison, a fairly vibrant organization with including our board, committees, and community activities. And as we've looked at ourselves, I think our biggest challenge now is sustainability, because we are essentially all volunteer, and when we look around, we see many of the same faces, and we don't have great diversity in terms of age, in terms of ethnic descriptions, and we think going forward we need to address that, and we'll have a chance to talk about that in the next section.
Thank you so much, Vic. Thank you all for those great introductions. And for those of you who might have come in after my introduction, we are asking that you, unless you are a panelist, that you turn off your screen and mute yourselves just to save bandwidth and make sure that there are fewer distractions. So we'd appreciate that. Let's build off that last bullet that you all covered, which was on your challenges. And I want to start with you, Bart, and just say, and I'd like all of you to just feel free to jump in and weigh in on this first question, and that is regarding your challenges. What are the internal and external forces occurring today that most impact your priorities and your focus? Let's kick off with you, Bart.
Well, the two external ones have been mentioned, climate change and destruction of habitat, diminution of biodiversity. And those are really at a crisis level, but that doesn't translate into a local level of seeing that as the most important thing to address. At the local level, we have affordable housing issue. We also have an economy that is not what I would call vibrant and struggling to get more people. And that has caused friction between conserving land and keeping the local economy vibrant. We focused on that in a couple of ways, one of which is to help farmers. The other is to try and help find land for affordable housing. But those friction points locally really do cut into the opportunity for Cornwall, which is very green, has state forest, and has a real opportunity to help with climate change and biodiversity. But we need not only local support, more local support for that, but I'm thinking we need to get paid for ecosystem services. We're exploring the carbon market for that. Actually, if we could get money from the carbon market, I think we might consider making payments in lieu of taxes to let the town know that these ecosystem services are very valuable and are under threat for the reasons I've talked about.
Thanks, Bart. The concept of ecosystem services was a huge topic within the Working in Natural Lands Working Group of the Governor's Council on Climate Change, and we'd like to see it elevated more globally in terms of climate change conversations across the board when it comes to policy and from the state level down. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Others want to jump in on internal and external forces?
Yeah, this is
Oh,
Joanne. I want to kind of follow up on a few things that Bart said that I think might be interesting, being that we are doing affordable housing issues, right? And I think that one of the things that a community land trust can do is help educate the population that many times doesn't want affordable housing because they're thinking of like a slum kind of an area, right? They're thinking of massive amounts of rental units all in one place. There's that kind of negativity that's out there, which is not true. But also the community land trust, by helping lower income people have home ownership, have that kind of stewardship of the land, give folks that kind of support. Community land trust can be scattered housing, can be a community all developed together. They can be co-ops. They can be many, many models there. But I think the importance is we conserve the land and provide affordable housing at the same time. In New London, we made a decision to pay property taxes. And we did that because New London is 6 square miles, which more than half of it are nonprofits that don't. And so when we were beginning to go into the community and talk about how do we organize this, the first thing many people said was, you taking land off the taxable market. And so we decided that we would do that. Some others in the community land trust movement are like, why? But it felt the right thing, and it's what the community wanted to do. And for the small amount of land we have, it is not tied our hands, and the homeowner pays the property taxes on their own house, which is their own house, which is not the, within the nonprofit. I think just the one other thing is that you do, particularly in urban areas like the struggling economy issue we face, is that as soon as Electric Boat put their engineering building in New London, the politicians fall all over themselves to create housing for them, which they want amenities, which is not affordable for low income folks who've been living in New London for a long time. So there's always that balancing act. How do you form the kind of relationships that you need to do what you're doing, but also stand firm on your principles and your core values?
Thanks, Joanne. Others, go ahead and jump in.
Can I jump in? That I find Joanne's approach so fascinating and cool for the Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust, because when one of the things that kept coming up, and what I also agree, is that these issues of climate change and racism are systemic. And so the fact that Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust is working to address that gap in generational wealth and home ownership in a way that is also conserving land for that purpose is really, really cool. And I think that's, to me, for land trusts, can we, within our mission, address these systemic issues, which are, they're sort of spread out, they've got tentacles. And so how can we do that in ways that are relevant to our mission and honest to our founding, but also have a lot of impact, And I think that's a really cool way of doing it. And for instance, I know actually also Aspetuck, and I know Aspetuck is really involved in the pollinator pathway movement in Connecticut. I've seen Mary Ellen LeMay speak several times, and it's just a really great way to engage homeowners in supporting our native pollinators and native species and educating, because it really does increase awareness about a number of things, not just the pollinators, but also the harm that pesticides cause to both our natural environment and our public health.
Maybe I can jump in here, again, from Bloomfield and Wittenberry. We have different challenges, but there's some relationship here, I think, that might be interesting. As I mentioned, I think our challenge is sustainability, succession. And a part of the solution to that is reaching out and creating more diversity among our membership, both and our board, frankly. Bloomfield's interesting in terms of we have about 50% African American population, and yet if you look at our membership and our board, it's way more predominantly Caucasian. And so as we think about our future, we need to be more sort of representative of the town, and the ways we're thinking of doing that, and we're struggling, but I think we're making a little bit inroad, is through education and events, and bringing people to hikes, and helping folks feel comfortable in the outdoors who maybe haven't in the past. So in a way, the part of the solution to our sustainability is intertwined with some of the things that I think on a social and environmental sort of justice perspective that people have been talking about. It's an interesting, I think, juxtaposition. So.
Thanks, Dick. David, you want to jump on in?
Sure. I think what everybody's saying is really interesting. I guess my takeaway is that, there's different parts of the state have different landscapes. Bart talked about the low population and large land area in your area where, it might not make sense for you guys to engage homeowners in, this biodiversity conversation, right? But maybe, getting some credits for all this, these trees that you have, might make more sense. And Joanne, with affordable housing, and it makes me think, there's opportunity actually for Aspetuck Land Trust, as Terry said, to think more maybe about how that's an opportunity for us, affordable housing. How might we weave that into our tapestry in our suburban Fairfield County area? So I guess, we all have to try to make, we all have to try to take our challenges and turn them into opportunities. And our opportunities are really defined by kind of our kind of the ecology of our towns, of our region. And so for us, Terry, reaching out to the homeowners has really made a lot of sense. And as I said, we've laid out this Green Corridor Initiative, which I think is really important. It has two prongs. One, save the last remaining open spaces. Two, engage all those homeowners that live in between these open spaces. And it works for us because we have a lot of homeowners. Most of the land in our towns is owned by homeowners, unlike, maybe Bart, or maybe they own just more land there. But it's really, we're turning this into a benefit for us because we're now driving our membership by engaging with the homeowners. We're kind of increasing our impact by involving them in improving biodiversity in their yards, which they love. It's a new audience for us. So we're touching more people. We're building, we're expanding our brand. We're raising more money. We've driven our membership from 1,000 to over 1,700. So it really works for us, and I just think it's really important for each land trust to figure out what works for them. I would say the other big piece for us is, this idea of, trying to look outside of, we're a regional land trust, so it's natural for us to think regionally. My dream is that we become a Southwest Connecticut, land trust, and that may not apply to everyone, but I think for each land trust out there that's listening to this, I think you have to find your opportunity and you really have to try to build on it because your success will actually bring more money, it will bring more attention, to your land trust, and it will then help you continue that impact. For us, it was the Green Corridor. And, it's our state, it's a kind of our stake in the ground that really got people's attention. So it's figuring out what that is for you, I suppose, if that makes sense.
And I
Terry, go ahead.
Yeah, totally. I want to build on that because one of the things that really resonates with me is sort of concrete, measurable goals that people can see. And to me, that's one of the things that Green Corridor for Aspetuck really does. And so when people, we're talking about really caring about systemic racism, climate change, and these sort of systemic issues, we started, and some of this was already in motion before I came on, but one of the things we're doing is we have this research project going on at Hoffman Evergreen Preserve with the Connecticut Sea Grant that is looking at how we can create healthier climate change resilient forests. And we're offering a webinar series. The last one is tomorrow at 1:00 through UConn on these topics. And they're open to everybody. So the research project will be available. The information will be available to every land trust to help manage their forests. And the webinars are available to everyone. They're on our website. Each one is an hour. They're great. But we're really trying to create sort of concrete things. I read a blog post a few years ago that the title was, "We're not going to be able to white paper our way out of the climate crisis." And so for me, what that is we can't keep writing about this. We have to really start inputting. We got to start really getting action done. move things across the finish line in every single way that we can, whether it's advocating for policy at the state or federal or local level, or putting in projects that are going to create measurable concrete goals and results that people can see. And when you do that, as to David's point, yeah, people will support that. They want to feel good about where their donations are going. Donors are more savvy today than ever. They can Google you, they can look at all your social media, and they just want to, but they're also very generous. That's the thing. When people feel good about the work you're doing, they're generous and they want to support it. People are good people and they want to help this planet.
Yeah, I agree, David. We actually do want to get landowners to understand how their land helps directly for biodiversity. I think we need to be very strong in making a case for conservation. One of the things, I sit on the Houstonic River Commission and the Houstonic Valley Association Board. We have the Houstonic River up here, which is a great recreational opportunity, but we're having lots of folks from away, Danbury, South Bronx, and there's no infrastructure up here to deal with recreation for that. And I think if you can't get people out into the nature, you won't get support for nature. And that's a really key thing. We're working on ways to be more inviting to people from away, but the state has very few resources devoted to recreation. DEEP is way underfunded. We have not had any help on the Houstonic River up here, notwithstanding its beautiful recreational place. It's very important to make that both in your backyard and a larger point about getting into nature and why nature is so valuable.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize the importance for land trusts to be connected to the community in a variety of ways. Now, it's going to be different depending on your land trust and you know the density of people and et cetera. But for us in Bloomfield and the surrounding areas, I think we've had success with joining other community organizations, the schools, the library, recreation and leisure departments, and putting on activities. And that's kind of a win-win in many ways in terms of getting your name out there, getting people to learn what you do, to value what you do. So we've certainly gone from, you know, an organization that was just conserving land to one that is seen, at least in part, as an important community resource. And I think for us, and I know David mentioned every land trust is going to be a little different in terms of what is the sort of what works for us. What works for us now and in the future will be to be seen as an important community organization, not just one that's holding land.
Mm-hmm.
Joanne, please.
Yeah, I'm also looking at some of the questions raised on the chat here. So I just wanted to get back to kind of some of these questions of both kind of values and how housing moves into this. And the language of housing, right? So we talk about, our land trust talks about permanently affordable housing. We don't promote ourselves as just low moderate, but the IRS insists that that's who you provide housing for. So when there's a couple of comments here about kind of, you know, mixed income, we are not doing new developments. New developments, a lot of mixed income is that, you know, what package of money you get together to provide it, you get a deal, the developer gets a deal if they put a certain percentage of low income housing in. Right now, what we're trying to do is look at the housing stock that exists. 13% of housing in Connecticut is vacant or abandoned. So that's what we're looking at. Talk about conservation. We don't want to be tearing down these houses and building newer mixed, you know, even mixed mod. We're trying to improve the communities that these are in and provide affordable housing in a variety of different models. Right now, we are based in New London. I saw David having a question. about kind of, in areas outside the urban area, looking at the issues of zoning and 2 to 3 acre or 2 to 3 house. Can we take some of these big houses that were built for very large families that don't really exist anymore in many ways, and turn some of them into maybe, a 2 or 3 family cooperative. And so those are things that we are all looking at. I mean, great ideas, kind of how do we, move into a community. We also, though, we're not going to start like organizing housing in Preston. What we're going to do is start organizing people who want to do that in places. So one group of people who has approached us, for example, are folks around farming, right? So we talk about preserving farming, but oftentimes that house has been in that farm's family for generations. And maybe the next generation doesn't want to farm, but that doesn't mean they necessarily want to lose their family home. So how do we then provide affordable housing for young farmers? A lot of young farmers are young people of color who are coming in and wanting to do this more, but who can't afford all of what's needed. And there are a lot of good organizations helping to help people purchase land for farming, but the housing issue is a sticky one. So that's another area that, no, we're still new. Have we done it? No, but are we looking at what are the other models out there? What are the other partners? Because there's a lot of other partners who can kind of help provide the technical assistance that we need to learn. So.
Thank you, Joanne. David, you talked in your intro, because I rushed you through, you talked about food security, and I think all of you probably can comment on your land trust and their relationship to food security issues. And what I love about this group, of course, and this is purposeful, is you are from very different parts of the state with different geographies. So, David, why don't we start with you, and then maybe all of you can weigh in if you can about how your land trust is addressing food security issues and partnering on that. David, go ahead.
That's great. As Pawtucket Land Trust, I think because we've taken this larger regional focus with the Green Corridor, which is coursing through 6 towns, and we are interested in expanding our kind of regional footprint in a sense, because we think it makes sense for our impact, so that we think it makes sense from an impact perspective. That has led us to look at Bridgeport, which is a surrounding town that we don't serve, and that really does have some real community food security issues. So we're engaging with them on a number of ways. I saw a question from Caitlin about that. What are you doing in terms of social justice, and how are you pursuing that? But that is opened up an opportunity for us to think about, well, how can we connect farmers of color with affordable farmland in our surrounding towns? We did protect a farm in Easton last year. It's currently being farmed by a farmer, but we will be moving into another surrounding town shortly that does have relatively affordable land and does have some farmland available. So for us, it's an opportunity that can drive our engagement with Bridgeport in terms of connect and on the community food security issue. So we are really excited about that as kind of an entry point to provide, that for folks.
Thanks, David. Others, please jump in. Barb?
Yeah, we offer our farmland for free. I pick up on what Joanne said. The problem, hang on just a second here. The problem really is getting support for the farmers. Housing is an issue. You're right. How could we get transportation to the markets down to Bridgeport from Cornwall? All of that infrastructure stuff that's needed to make farming a success is very hard. It's hard to find help.
Yeah.
There are some people who are very knowledgeable and you can go to them, but there needs to be a more concerted effort focused on just that. I call it farm to table, farm to urban table. One other point I would make is that investing in housing, one principle of conservation is to build more densely in places that are already built. And in Cornwall, for example, we have only standalone houses. We don't have apartments, but we could older people would like apartments. Younger people might like apartments. Right now, we're
Yes.
talking about a wastewater treatment facility for one part of town, right on the Houstonic, but we don't have any infrastructure for that. So getting help for these farmers and making the case for their food security, there's a real opportunity here for that, given what's happening out west with the drought and all that.
Yeah, I could jump in. We have 3 working farms that we support in Wittenberry Land Trust. And one is actually pretty unusual. Lisa Lane is an urban farm, and there's a farmer who works there and sells to the community and regionally. And then we also have community gardens there, and this provides access to folks who would normally have that kind of opportunity. And then we have a couple of other farms that we've initially got for really conservation purposes, but now have been turned into working farms. So I think even for a small land trust like ours, it's been a valuable pathway.
I know that Avalonia has we're been offered a donation of a farm in Preston. That it's just, I mean, just the process just started, but it looks very promising, and that'll be, I think, and maybe someone from Avalonia will jump in the chat, but I think we only have one small piece of farmland in our portfolio, so this would be a significant new sort of venture for us to really do this. But like when I've talked to other land trusts that are larger, again, touching on different social issues is something that is both the right thing to do and also really resonates with the people that like your land trust already. You know, people care about, the people that care about conserving land also care about affordable housing. They also care about climate change. They care about food security. They care about institutional racism. So anytime you can kind of connect all those dots, and someone asked, you know, how do you have those conversations? You just have to have them. You know, you have to sort of continue and obviously provide space for respectful discussion. But you know, Avalonia this summer is partnering with Outdoor Afro, which is an organization that supports Black participation in, you know, outdoor activities, and Latino Outdoors, which works with the Latinx community in the same way. We're partnering with them for events. We're having the key parts of our website and our brochure translated into Spanish, Mandarin, French, in a way to be more welcoming and that sort of thing. So there are just a lot of different ways. And so if people want to talk to me about why we're working with different communities, and really, I'm happy to talk to them, and I'm happy to walk them all the way through it. But you just have to kind of be willing to have a conversation that, you know, and I have to say, anytime I've had conversations like that, they've gone well. You know, people can see the truth in front of them.
You know, I want to jump in here because I think it's a great segue to our next question, and then we'll get to some of the comments and the questions in the chat before we conclude today. But you know, in October, when we had our first virtual conference, which was the replacement for our March of 2020 conference, we had in the afternoon Rue Mapp, who is the CEO and founder of Outdoor Afro, and she talked about that. And she said just that. It's just, there's no formula to it. It's just about taking steps forward and building relationships and reaching out. And, you know, I do want to pose the second question, but I'm hoping that all of you will touch on that in your responses, which is, you know, to this question of what is your land trust doing, and what do you see as the land trust community's greatest opportunities to address all of these issues. And you know, I'd like to kind of expound on that concept of partnerships. And Joanne, why don't we start with you, just with the Fresh New London, because you have referenced quickly Fresh New London, and I think for all land trusts out there, you might have some land that could be perfectly suitable for something that you hadn't thought of, that still fits within your mission and still certainly fits within any restrictions that are on your land. And so sometimes it takes that kind of partnership collaboration or partner collaboration to get that brainstorming going. So let me start with you, and then please just jump in.
Yeah, no, that's a good point I was going to raise earlier, is that it's really helpful because sometimes we think we want to expand our mission, but the skills needed for everything that we need to know is probably beyond our own capability. And so by partnering with Fresh New London, here are folks who really focus on this and who have been focusing on food security issues, who have been linking to other local farms, who provide have community gardens all around the urban area, have snack beds so people can walk by the garden and pick a strawberry or, you know, a cherry tomato or whatever. So, and do a lot of education. So I think working together, if there are organizations, maybe there are organizations caring about food security but don't have land, and then you have land, and then you can kind of work that and then do that kind of. So like a basis, I think, of the community land trust being community is those partnerships, like organizational partnerships, but also looking at like some of the issues around farmers, thinking, well, there might not be a chapter somewhere that we have multiple farms in one area, but we would link farmers from Preston and Lebanon and wherever, Franklin and wherever, as we kind of get folks who can share those common needs. So we see the stewardship is not just of the land, but of building the community that keeps this going. In terms of those kinds of building relationships is a really important part of what we're doing.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, please.
So I mean, yeah, this is so great. And I had the opportunity to participate in a anti-racism sort of
Cohort. It was the cohort. The
yes,
anti,
cohort.
right?
I was looking for the right word. It was more than a panel discussion. Went over several months. It was sponsored, put together by the Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut, which is, if you're in Eastern Connecticut and you don't know about them already, you should. But it was a great experience, and really gave me a chance to sort of dig a bit more deeply into those areas. And one of the things that was raised was you really have to build the relationships. Like, you can't just go in and say, I have this great new program, don't you want to take part in it? And I really respect the fact that the Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust took so long to build those relationships intentionally before they actually incorporated. Like, that's really cool. That's what's needed. And so building the relationships between, you know, the farmers and the folks that do food insecurity is going to just make your work much more targeted, more effective. I'm already excited to have these conversations. And yeah, pardon me. Yeah, so that's I think really what is needed is this relationship building, and there's so much opportunity.
Yeah.
Others.
So yeah, let me expand on the relationship thing as it relates to both in, you know, sort of strengthening our own organization as well as building communities. You know, I think I see this as both within our community and across communities and across land trusts. So within our community, again, building connections with other organizations, the library, the schools, recreation department. We've done that and we'll continue to do that for, you know, good reasons. It's also selfish reasons. You know, that's how we try to grow our organization and make it more vibrant. But the other relationships that are going to be important, I think, for our sustainability are across with other land trusts. And you know, we've had the opportunity and have to dip our toe into this with Amy's help and CLCC's help of exploring mergers. This is you know, very early in looking at feasibility, but whether it's a merger or collaboration or shared services, RCPs, that's clearly, I think, the direction that we all should be going in as we look to expand what we do, both to strengthen our own organizations and promote our missions.
Yeah, I agree with that. We have the Litchfield Hills Green Print with about 20 land trusts but we could do more. The interesting thing about this part of New England is the sense of identity each town has. It's almost as if we were baseball teams. You know, if you're on the Cornwall, whatever, that's much better team than the Sharon, whatever. And it's an odd thing, but if you can respect those local values, that's the challenge of creating those shared groups, is respect the local thing, but still get the global thing done.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But that we're clearly way too fragmented. I was just thinking of accreditation. If all 130 land trusts became accredited, you have to do it every 5 years and it costs at least $10,000 to do it. that's a lot of money spent, I think, on a worthy cause, but in a very inefficient manner. We've got to figure out ways to support one another without wasting resources.
Thanks. David, any comments on that, on these opportunities? I mean, Aspetuck is just doing so much, and you do so much relationship building.
Yeah, yes, I think it's all very important, and it's good to build relationships. We're doing that in Bridgeport. We spent the past year having conversations with folks about how the land trust could help and support that community, but not trying to define and drive it. Really, to have the conversation, build the relationships, and I think because ultimately we want to be of service to that community in some way, shape, or form, but that has to be determined by the community. And there's a number of partners like the Green Village Initiative and other groups, the Sierra Club that we've had conversations with. So we just finished a little study that some Yale interns did for us in terms of looking at models that we could potentially benefit from as we figure out how to create a model with the Bridgeport community, models of land trusts working, kind of in partnership with urban communities. So we're exploring that. And I think the big thing for us is, this idea of allyship. How can, this can be very fraught and controversial, but how can we use our privilege as pretty much a white suburban land trust in service, to this community, our expertise, our connection to funders, to people with money, to support what that community wants. So that's really kind of where we're at. And I'm seeing from our members, I mean, we're in Fairfield County. We've got some people with some deep pockets here. They're very excited. Like Terry said, people are, when you start having these conversations, people are very excited about having an opportunity to support that bridge to help this community. So we're trying to drive that, but we're not trying to drive it in a way where we're coming into that community and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. So it's a real process, but I think as part of our regionalization outlook, we want to, it's incumbent upon us to look at different communities, look at different towns and their different needs. And it can only bring more impact and more opportunity to us, as everybody said, with partnerships brings opportunity, it brings more support. But I'm really excited about that, how we can diversify our land trust and connect our supporters, to support this community that traditionally has not been involved or engaged with in any way, shape, or form around land conservation. So it's very exciting.
And I think that all of you have touched on this in some way, shape, or form, is that it is as much about providing opportunity for more people to gain access to land, but it's also about the sustainability of land conservation as a movement as well. Because the more people that we can engage in the joys of being outside and in nature, and whether it's a small pocket park or 300 acres in Cornwall, Connecticut, we all need those spaces. And the more people we can connect to those spaces, the better we are looking for the future of our own sustainability as organizations, gaining new members and gaining interest and creating that next generation of leaders. So kudos to all of you for thinking beyond your organization and really the broader community impacts of your work. And so with that, I just want to, in the last, what do we have here? Whatever minutes, I want to just move to address some of the questions and comments that have come up through the chat. And so I'm going to call upon Rebecca from CLCC to unmute herself and start posing those questions, and please jump in with a response, and we'll get to as many of those as we can before we wrap up. Rebecca, you want to read out some questions?
Absolutely. Thanks, Amy. And thank you all for participating in the chat. There's been a lot of great discussions and sort of questions answered in the chat, et cetera, and throughout this whole discussion. But one that I think is still kind of hanging, we've touched on it a little bit, is generally, do you as the land trusts find that the political aspect of some of these discussions is fraught, as it is nationally on so many levels? The person who posed this question noted that the tension can cause stress in membership. And then following that question, there was some discussion about sort of lobbying and advocacy on the part of your land trusts in the chat as well. So I know that's a heavy one.
I don't totally understand where he's coming from, or she, but I would say that, you know, you're never going to be able to make everybody happy. So you have to do what you think is right. But I'm not exactly sure where they were coming from. Maybe you, everybody else.
I mean, yeah, I saw that little exchange go by, and the person said in their bylaws, they weren't allowed to advocate for legislation. But I think actually on a general level, you can, as a nonprofit, spend like 2% of your time or something like that lobbying. So you can let your membership know about advocacy issues that you would like them to take action on. And as for, I mean, it's certainly but like I said before, and I mean, I agree with David, you know, you might lose some folks if you have some of these conversations, but I think my experience at least is that when you explain it in a way that's sort of linear and concrete and connected and that sort of thing, people are pretty receptive, you know? So hopefully if you can do it in a way that is just respectful, then they will listen. I mean, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, is obviously everyone knows, a big climate change scientist. She has found that only about 7% of people are actually dismissive of climate change and cannot be reached. So, you know, those 7% of people, she says, don't try and deal with them because they're not going to ever listen to you. But the other 93%, you know, are at least willing to listen to you. And so, and the same thing. So my experience has been, even when we're talking about, you know, why we need to be more active and intentional about addressing institutional racism from within our mission, people listen, you know, they're definitely open to it. And I mean, they vary from open to it to, yay, that's great, I can't wait, I'm so excited. You know, they really want us to do that work.
No, I'll just jump in here before was it Bart? Were you about to say something?
Well, I think it focuses on the importance of leadership and finding people who are good leaders who respect everyone's views and try to knit them together to a both-and solution. The polarization that we see nationally doesn't necessarily have to happen locally. In fact, I don't think it does. I think we are pretty good at both-hand solutions locally. It's a lot of static, in my view, that's going on nationally, but hopefully that's just static.
Yeah, and you know, you actually, I was going to make 2 points. The first is that we do, for the person who had posed the question about can a land trust lobby, you absolutely can and you should. And on our website, we do have, and Rebecca can put the link into the chat for us, but we have some information on lobbying on our website for land trusts. And really, you should feel empowered to speak up and get engaged and do the same for your members and ask them to get involved as well. These are all issues that we all should be speaking up around at every level.
And then I have to say, I was promoting our climate change webinar series, the very first one, and someone contacted me and said, absolutely not. That's not a thing. I like hiking in the woods, but climate change doesn't exist. You have lost me as a member, and I just let him go. You know, sometimes you hate to lose people, but sometimes they go because you're doing the right thing, and it's still the right thing to do.
Right.
Joanne, go ahead. Joanne.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think of myself as a strategist in a lot of ways, right? And so if people can agree to the mission and how we articulate that, it's one of the reasons that we did the work on our core values. We wanted people to be clear about what our core values were. And it's one of the reasons we have an orientation for membership. So that doesn't mean we don't have disagreements. It doesn't mean we don't like kind of go, oh, how should it be or what should we do or whatever, but we don't want to get into mission creep and we don't want to get into throwing our values out for some level of effectiveness, which really in the long run hurts what our values really are and what our relationships are. So it's always tricky to do this kind of work, right? We always know, and we also know, particularly around this form of permanently affordable housing, that some people want to own their land, right? So that, we're not saying everyone needs to do this. We're saying this is an opportunity for home ownership, usually about people who do not have that opportunity and can still build an equity in this while we maintain this as affordable housing. So I think explaining things well, and then people can take it or leave it and not try to get everybody in on trying to make a decision that, where there's actually difference about the mission.
And I think the more listening that we all do and, the more responsive we can be to issues in the community will set us less apart as an organization and become more of the fabric of our communities as an institution, as a community institution where land trust really, really can serve well. Rebecca, do you have another question or so? We've got about 10 minutes left here.
Well, we do have a question for Joanne. Joanne, if you can go into more detail about the land trust chapters within the different communities, just to give us a little more insight into the community land trust work.
Sure. So remember, we're new and we've just coming out of a pandemic. So actually, we only have one chapter that's actually been functioning for several years now, and that's in New London. And really the idea there being, and I think as maybe Bart, you were the one, we are 169 different cities and towns here. And so we really felt like it's important for people to be able to organize in the context and in their community. And so the whole idea of a chapter is people who live within that municipality work together, define what their next project would be, maybe find the next house, or say, here's a piece of land that we could claim, reclaim, get donations for, get it donated, whatever. So that we really try to give that, the chapter really has that. On the other hand, it is the board, which is a regional board, which has to make the final policy, fundraising, budget kinds of decisions, right? So we try to always make sure we have people in chapters who are also on the regional board, and that are really, we're hoping now as we come out of the pandemic, can begin to work with folks in other cities and towns who want to create their own local chapter, because the board does not want to just start picking off properties around the region. We really want that to be in the community so we can also have the kind of stewardship and support. And, some of it does become this question of affordable housing, right? We don't want to, I live in Norwich. We had a land trust here. Some of the land is still in trust. We are in the process of reviving that to be a chapter of the region. So, there are efforts kind of beginning in many places.
Rebecca, I think we have time for maybe one more question before we wrap up.
Excellent. So this was a question that came in as the group was discussing the different farming and food security initiatives and the use of working lands. So I'm going to read the question straight and hope that makes sense with this context. So the question is, for someone still learning about land trusts regarding greening initiatives, do private land trusts work with public works to provide the flexibility needed for pilot projects? These initiatives on farm to table sound wonderful, but curious on the benefit of private works in relation to or separate from public works.
I might be able to touch on that a little bit. I'm not sure I understand the question completely, but thinking back to the farm that we have at Lisa Lane, this is a partnership with the town of Bloomfield. And so the town actually owns the land. We have the easement, and we work with the town to support the farmer and the programs that go on there. And so in a way, we're partnering, yes, with Public Works who help out, and it serves the surrounding community. So I think, we are a private organization, obviously, but but we have no problems working with different town organizations depending on what the needs are.
Yeah, others, and maybe just step just a little bit away from the specific question, but I think that concept that you just raised about public-private partnerships is really important. And so maybe if you all have examples of how your land trusts have partnered with some of your municipalities and relationships that you've built in that way, I think might be a nice way to wrap this up.
Well,
Terry?
we've certainly gone to different towns for open space funding, and then you wind up with some discussion about what the land will be used for. You know, they'll often say, you know, well, we'd like it to have access for different activities, or so that is obviously, but that's relationship building too, that if the town is going to give you their taxpayer money, whether or not it's been designated for open space, they want to know where it's going and that the townspeople are going to benefit. So that is obviously one of the more easier ways. And also for those of you wondering about funding, that's an avenue of funding. You should always investigate those towns.
Yeah. Yeah, we've also been able to use, I mean, because we're doing home ownership, we need to deal with lead removal issues and renovations of old homes. And because we're working with a population of folks who would be eligible for those, you know, because their income qualifications, then we have been able to help access city money, particularly in New London so far. But we have really tried to build a relationship with the city on a number of reasons. And like I said, including paying taxes at this point, because that seemed to be what our members really felt we needed to do. But again, we're not owning, you know, massive acres of land at this point, and that those will be town by town decisions, not the whole region. There are certain things that are regional decisions. You can't change the ground lease from one city to the other, but you can change some of the policies locally.
Great. Thanks, Joanne. Any last thoughts either on that topic or anything else before we move to our final quick last question? David or Bart, anything you want to jump in on after that, or we?
Well, I think that private organizations can be more innovative and agile than the town. So many rules and regulations for town meetings, for meetings of selectmen, for meetings of this commission or that commission need to be dealt with, and it's certainly part of the landscape, but innovative ideas and moving more quickly and finding funding other than through the public purse is a really important part of private, I call them non-governmental organizations.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we are approaching our 4-minute mark here, and I just I want to thank you all so much for spending your time with us and sharing your insights and all of the amazing, inspiring work that you're doing in all parts of the state. I applaud you so heartily and thank you so much for that. And I want to thank everybody else who's joined us today. I can't wait until we are live again, so I can give everybody a hug when you walk in the door of Wesleyan. I was telling my staff that that's something I do and people can't believe it. And I said, that's not planned. It's just, I want to hug everybody when they walk in the door. So I can't wait to do that again. But for our last question, and this goes for everybody out there who's listening, and then we'll have a little fun with a word cloud. I'd like to just ask you, after today's conversation, and again, this is for our presenters, but also everybody there in virtual land, in one word, how are you feeling about the future of your land trust? Just one word. And I'm gonna go around and ask each of our participants, but if all of you out there can just put one word in the chat, we'll see if we can play around with a word cloud. Vic, I'm gonna start with you, one word.
Optimistic.
David. You're on mute.
I concur with Vic, optimistic.
Terry?
Hopeful.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. We're all in the same place. Optimistic, hopeful. Yeah, hopeful.
This is going to be two very big words in that word cloud. Bart?
I'll pick another word, energized.
Excellent.
Good. Yeah.
Excellent. So let's give everybody in the chat just a minute or two to get those responses in. And I have no idea how this works, but Rebecca assured me she could do this. So thank you, Rebecca. And while I'm talking and we're waiting just for these last couple of minutes for this word cloud to fill up, I wanted to send this just a few reminders. The first is, well, actually came up from today. Our good friend Connie Manis, I know, is out there somewhere with us today. And Connie's doing a workshop with Connecticut Farmland Trust on Thursday night about land trust, the Kent Land Trust in particular, her land trust, and food security, and how they have partnered with a local organization to help the community with food issues. And I think that would be very worthwhile in light of our conversation today to think about attending. And that's Thursday night. But Thursday at noon, I hope that you will all come back and be with us for our climate roundtable, which I hope and I expect will be equally as interesting as today's conversation was with all of our Connecticut Land Trust leaders here today and out there in the room, so to speak. And then next week, we have 2 more roundtables. Rebecca from our staff will be leading a next generation roundtable on Tuesday, and we've got a phenomenal lineup of panelists for that. And then next Thursday, we're going to wrap up this conference, this virtual conference, by hearing probably some of the same things said, but from different perspectives shared by those that live across state borders. We have representatives of land trusts from North Carolina, Tennessee, Massachusetts, and New York. And that conversation will be facilitated by Kevin Case, who many of you remember from the Land Trust Alliance. And now Kevin is in New York at the Mohawk Preserve. So I hope that you will spend all of your lunch times Tuesday and Thursday this week and next with us and participate as you did today. So Rebecca, do we have a word cloud?
Yeah, let's we have more than 2 words, Amy.
Okay.
So I was trying to furiously type in some of the answers in the chat as well, but lots of hopeful, optimistic, grateful, enthusiastic, some really great adjectives here.
Well, I honestly think that based upon all the work that you are doing in your communities and your regions and statewide, I think we all have reason to feel this way as well. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today and being a part of our land conservation community, and more importantly, being a part of your own community. And I encourage you to continue to reach out and build new relationships and really continue to do the good work that you're doing with others. So with that, I think we can say goodbye, and I will see you on Thursday at noon as we continue the conversation around climate. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you,
And
Amy.
Thank
to
you, Amy.
our participants, thank you all so much for not only being here today, but for all you do for all of us. It's
Thanks.
amazing.
Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
Thank you, Amy.